Why don't we just get right to it? Here we go. Hey, Jeff, thank you for joining me on Next Future Today. It's so good we met months and months ago, 6 months ago. I don't know, it feels like a long time ago. But we haven't had a chance to really go deep except for a little bit of a preview a couple weeks. So you've had quite a career in public service, in public health, in the military. You've been a busy guy in the public realm. Today, I'm hoping that we talk mostly about public health and civic service and being a civilian, or not serving. So public health, suffice to say, a lot has changed over the last 20-ish years or so in public health, healthcare.gov, all the things that are coming along, and you've been in this field right during all of this. So how did you end up in this space? And then I want to pick apart what's going on with HR1 and things like that are a little more insider knowledge, perhaps.
Sure. So I did a stint in the United States Navy, active duty, and then left the Navy to go to school with this whole idea that I would become a history professor. Which I quickly figured out I did not want to be a history professor when I found out all that entailed.
Okay.
And I ended up getting a master's in public administration, which leaves you open to doing pretty much anything. The one thing I had never studied was healthcare, but I'm getting out of my master's program in 1993, year one of the Clinton administration. And that spring, as I'm leaving school, the hottest thing in town is Hillary Clinton's healthcare task force. And they're going to do healthcare reform, insure the uninsured. And I had my own experiences with struggling with insurance when my wife opened her own business and I wasn't working, I was a student. So I kind of related to the uninsured problem and thought, well, that's something I'd like to get involved in. But the only thing I had to go on was operational expertise. Okay. And so I came into what is now CMS to do operational implementation of healthcare reform, which never happened. But along the way, then I kind of got what made CMS tick and got to be on the ground floor of a number of implementations, starting with the Balanced Budget Act, which changed how we paid for managed care. And so I was taking this all from the operations perspective and then systems. So early on, I took a class called Structured Analysis and Design, which now the principles still work, but it's not exactly how we do things in the modern world of IT development. But at this pre-agile,
right, or early, anyhow,
ops and things like that. But still, it's the same principles still apply. It's just different ways of getting to the same end. And then I worked on a lot of new systems. And when I figured out that CMS was really focused on payment more than anything else, because right now we're paying out $1.5 trillion a year. It is the biggest issue is Medicare payment. So getting familiar with a Medicare payment system was a good place for me to redirect my career in a direction that would give me some upward mobility. And I started working on risk adjustment and implemented the first processing systems in CMS to bring the data into CMS, and then the system that processed risk adjustment factors that would figure out how to pay managed care plans under a new methodology. And that has permeated a lot of the industry. It's used in other Medicare payment systems, and now it's used in the Affordable Care Act payment.
Well, one of the things that I found through this podcast series and several that I've done over the years is most people don't end up where they got on purpose. Things happened. You said yes to an opportunity that you didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. You meet somebody who has a different perspective and you think, oh, that actually seems interesting. Let me do that. Which is curious when, that's not how it seems like it should play out in the movies. Like you want to be a lawyer, so you become a lawyer. Some things are much more straightforward apparently, but I like like to find the stories of people that have sort of found a path and made it despite it not being completely obvious, even in hindsight.
Right. And I think, I started in the military and career paths in the military. I was in aviation, like the career path. If I had been a flying officer, and got a college degree, then decided to join the military and fly, there's a very clear set of duties that you need to do to work your way up if you had this aspiration of rising to the top of the leadership structure. And it's very clearly mapped out. And for enlisted people, it's also clearly mapped out what you need to do if you want to become a chief petty officer, for instance. The civilian government, there's some places where that's true, but I never saw a very clear roadmap, and I always considered myself to be opportunistic and looking for, when things came up, raising my hand and jumping into the breach. And that's another thing, like just being willing to step in and do something where other people may be a little bit leery about it because it seems a little bit risky.
Yeah, so glad you brought this up because I was going to bring it up if you didn't. Part of the sort of special skill sets that I see for people that really make a big difference in what innovation means in a real world sense, not just in a theoretical sense, is that you need people to identify that there is an opportunity to innovate. And then usually there's got to be somebody or a team, maybe if you're lucky, that needs to translate what a vision is versus what the current reality is. And it sounds like the sort of role that you've had has been sort of a mix of bridging between policy and technology and people, and I'm not sure where operations, how that fits into the mix, but that sort of realm is much bigger than, just stepping in as like, I'm an operations person or I'm a policy person. Has that always been your natural inclination, is to say, oh, that looks like something that needs to be solved and I'll figure it out? Or how did you end up in with that sort of mindset and taking the steps into your post-military career?
Well, my very first job in CMS was working on what is now National Provider ID. But there was no HIPAA at the time, so we were trying to do a voluntary effort. Well, we needed to do it because we were going to build a centralized claims processing system. So Medicare was going to have one, but I had a visionary boss that was like, if we're going to build this, let's not impose this on the world. Let's work with the world and say, can we build something that not only Medicare could use, but could be used for the entire world, so you could issue an MPI and it could be used for private billing. It could be used in Medicaid. It could be used in TRICARE.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so it's kind of a radical reimagination.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we did things we never thought we would do, but we were forced to do them.
Yeah.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? When you're backed into a corner, you're either giving up and saying, we're not going to implement this, but it was in the statute. It was supposed to be implemented. Or you say, we are going to implement it, and we're going to listen to the direction we've been given and figure out a different way of doing it. Right.
So I've never been in civil service. Historically, there's certainly the perception. Well, I'll say my perception. I won't speak for the world. But, so industry, commercial, however you want to label it, there's the whole, there's the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast and break things. But you don't have a law or several laws or regulations or bills that are passed that prevent you from doing or not doing things, right? So that in itself, what you just described, seems relatively rare, because normally, having responded to RFPs for big old systems, for government systems, if it said, thou shalt do this risk adjustment, and you've already spent however much time and money on doing that, I don't know that a lot of people would have the stomach to question that, at all, that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, this was, in essence, the administrator had to come up with his own way reconciling himself to risk adjustment, one of which, so he came in and the quote was, I am not a fan of risk adjustment. At the very first briefing on risk adjustment that my boss gave. Over time, he started talking about doing special needs plans for people like diabetics or something like that. And using a demographic model that didn't recognize that you had diabetes meant nobody would build a diabetes management plan because you'd be massively undercompensated. The only way to do that is if you have risk adjustment. Once he understood that his policy objectives could only be accomplished by doing something that we were already working on. Then we had to kind of give him the fig leaf of we've made it operationally simpler. And then he came up with a budget neutrality adjustment that allowed the plans to transition into this and not get like a switch flip of a major downward adjustment of their payment, which is what they feared. So there was kind of a policy side, and then we had to do the operation and system side to convince them that it could be done. And then we got the whole thing done.
So that there's a good jumping off point to HR1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and its impact on Medicaid and non-Medicaid systems. Can you, for people who haven't heard about it yet or haven't really reconciled what it means beyond the news blips, what does it mean to the world of Medicaid and non-Medicaid public health?
Yeah, so it really hits most heavily Medicaid and then the Affordable Care Act coverage. With Medicaid, the biggest thing is the work requirement. And this, again, becomes a systems and operational challenge. You have a bunch of folks that you don't know what their access to technology is.
Right.
And now, not only do they have to apply for a Medicaid benefit, but before they can have the benefit, they have to prove that they have a job or have reason to be excluded from that requirement, exempted from that requirement, so that they can get coverage without working. But that proving that you have a job and that you're actively working or working to get a job, if that is sufficient, all those things become barriers to getting coverage. There are many people that will struggle to be able to prove that. What if you're an independent contractor, for instance?
Yeah,
how do I have a job? I don't know. I run my own business. Does that count as having a job? Maybe, maybe not.
Right. Yeah.
So there's just if you're a farmer, how do you prove that you have a job? Will make it much harder to get covered and to stay covered.
Well, yeah. So I haven't applied for that kind of health coverage, but having gone through the FAFSA process and getting loans and whatnot for college for my kids. Yeah, here's what my revenue was, my income was 2 years ago when I had 2 startup companies that were pre-revenue. So, what do you know? It doesn't look great.
That could actually work in your favor, but
yeah, until it doesn't anymore. So
yeah.
So it's it's either, in my experience, was either essentially dramatically over-reported on what the future or the current reality held, or dramatically under-reported, which in that case would be better to be on that side, but it didn't last very long. So
yeah, and I've had this, I'm a startup this year, and I can't tell you how many different things I've had to do where somebody asks me to project my revenue. Even doing contracts, sometimes the contracting wants to know your projected revenue, and my answer was no clue. Like, really? It started at net negative, and it's moving towards positive now, but like you start out as a net negative, and then when do you turn it to positive?
About 20 years ago, there's a book that came out by Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think, which was all about discount usability testing and just do anything, interact with people to see if it will actually work for them before you lock it in and try to foist it off on, millions, tens of millions of people. Is there an upside in the push, as painful as it is right now, with having to do work requirement reporting twice a year at a minimum is the recommendation that we're all waiting for from CMS for Medicaid? Well, how do you see that sort of playing out?
So it started with what are state documents that are standard for each state, because you're operating right now in 30 states for the federal exchange. So if there's one document a state produces, you could learn to scan that document. It's always going to look the same. Name, date of birth, whatever is always going to be in the same place on that document. So you can use OCR and machine learning and train a bot basically to do all that work. And then at the end, you can still have a human being look at it and say yes. Or you could say, It's when it kicks out that a human being has to look at it and say, no, you can build those kind of rules. So we were working on that. And then they started, I think, on pay stubs. Sure, there's paychecks and a few other big ones, Gusto and stuff out there where a pay stub probably looks standard, but any business that generates its own pay stub has the same fields, but it's not going to all be laid out the same way.
Right.
But you can, if you have AI, you can figure out where, pay period end date is. And if like the pay period start and a pay period end, then, this is a 1 week, a 2 week, bi-monthly, whatever. And then you can take the income that's earned there and project that out to an annualized income calculation. So you can do all that without a person touching it. So we started doing that kind of stuff. The person still has to do an upload, but they can scan the document and upload it, take a picture of it on their phone, upload it, what have you. And then as long as it's readable to OCR and AI, then it'll get scanned in. The AI can do the work and figure it out.
The core concepts of ex parte and just making things simpler or don't make me think, as Steve wrote in his book. It's just it's so powerful. And it is interesting that, so now versus 10 years ago, how old is Uber and Lyft and all of that?
Oh my gosh.
At least 10 years.
Probably 12, 13 years now, at least.
Yeah. So, if you're an Uber or a Lyft driver, you're theoretically, you're working, but you could be working for one trip, period. Or 10,000, like some people that I don't travel as much as I used to, but when I'm talking to Uber and Lyft and similar drivers, how'd you get started doing this? And how many, it says you got 5 stars and 10,000 reviews. How the heck did you do that? But it's not, and those companies are big enough now and they're established enough that it wouldn't be hard to take a look at an Uber paycheck, whatever that looks like, and or however they're getting paid, and consume that as a system. But the whole gig economy that's spawned means that there's lots of any one person could have 100 different jobs, right?
Correct.
I think this is interesting because I'm interested in the behavioral aspects of data and user experience. Do you look at what they reported on the IRS data? Do you report on the after effect and long-term add up, or do you look at, I can see regular deposits to your checking account. There are other services that you can use that are permission-based to reach out into systems on behalf of the person who's applying, instead of having them go there, download a copy of their statement or whatever, then upload it. Because if you can get the digital path with predetermined integrations, it becomes much easier for everybody. It's harder to fake, because how are you going to get your bank to fake entries for you, right? So in theory, everybody wins, but it's also, now we're in the realm of where's that line between, it's kind of like the HIPAA side of the conversation and privacy in general. How do you, as a person, as a citizen, as a constituent, as a beneficiary potentially, how comfortable do I feel that now we're commingling commercial and government data? How scary
there
is
are
that
a
too?
bunch of different services. We looked at them. So for income, we use the government sources, and then we used one of the credit reporting agencies that had a good amount of income. But one of the problems is it's a credit reporting agency. Their income is best on, like large employers and things like that. So if you're an independent contractor, they don't have any information on you. How would they get that? Or if you're working for like a local restaurant, they don't have that. So a lot of the healthcare.gov constituency was not covered by that. But we started talking to some folks. We never got there, but we did talk with folks that had other approaches. One was looking at banking information. And so another one is going to your employer. So basically giving access to, like, if you have if you work for a restaurant, it's quite possible they're using Gusto or Paychex or something like that to actually do payroll. So you could grant them permission to access the Paychex account for you or the Gusto account for you or what have you. And then they could verify your income. So, and that could all be done without you submitting paperwork. But all of that is kind of a different electronic path you have to go down. You have to get a contract with one of these entities that does it. You have to rethink about what your operational workflow is, because, we had a workflow of like verify it all electronically in near real time during a session. Whatever's not becomes a DMI, and you're kicked into this resolution process. This is something that's in between, because you could still submit a pay stub, but could we get there in like a couple of days with this service? Because sometimes it takes a little bit to do it. Could we kick you into a subroutine that immediately you grant the permission, and it's like almost the same as the near real-time application experience?
No, I think it's an exciting time. It's also kind of scary. Access to data cuts many ways. When it's to your benefit and it's protected, then yay, hopefully we all win. But the more that this data gets matched up across lines that they should feel more firm than they are. That data has always been out there. It's just, now it's become so inexpensive and simple to do that, the barrier to entry to be a fraudulent person or a group of hackers or whatever you want to call them, it's real close to zero for the cost. It's just,
I mean, you're acutely aware of it when you open a business and you haven't interacted with anybody yet. You've just incorporated in your state.
Right.
You haven't even advertised the existence of your business, and you're getting unsolicited mail at first, and then as soon as you get an email domain, you're getting spammed in email. As soon as you have a LinkedIn presence, you're getting hit on LinkedIn with all kinds of unsolicited stuff. It is amazing how flexible the system is to respond immediately to any kind of trigger event. That I'm sure they have triggers out there as soon as somebody incorporates either that, or they're hitting it with spiders and then doing a data difference thing and creating their own triggers. But one way or another, they're finding out a lot of information, piecing it together. A lot of times very imperfectly. I was telling somebody how this past weekend we were out hiking, and I was saying, hey, I don't know what you get in your business, but I was just told that somebody would help me in my fitness business, which I didn't know I had one. But I found out via this spammy email that they would help me write a book about my fitness routines that I sell to my customers, which I didn't even know I was in the fitness business until that happened. I was like, I do go to the gym. I guess I could take a couple of videos and put some stuff online of me working out that nobody wants to see, but...
Well, who knows? It's the internet.
It is the internet.
Jeff, so one thing I want to, so the normal wrap up that I do with Next Future Today is, the point of Next Future Today as a concept, which came out of very early after the shutdown in 2020. Now what? So if you were trudging along in whatever role that you happen to be in during COVID, and suddenly, lots of businesses don't exist anymore because they had to close their doors and they never reopened. So in the spirit of trying to make sure that I and others don't suffer the same fate, for anybody that wants to get involved in the kind of work that you've done in the public sphere, what is something that you would recommend that they do today so that they can purposely create their next future instead of being potentially caught off guard, or something to move them forward instead of just having them stick around and wait to see what happens?
So I think for anybody that wants to be able to do the kind of career jump that I did, for instance, where I was kind of thinking when I came to DC, I'd be in security or something like that, international affairs and stuff, because I was Navy, and that was and I studied international history and international politics. I kind of saw myself going there, and then did domestic policy healthcare. what was my mindset was I know operations, and I sold myself for knowing operations. So what you need, like if you're not good at doing this and you're too stuck on what you have done, it's learning how to focus on your skill sets and what you bring to the table regardless of what the industry is, because basic skills are needed everywhere. And
Right.
So if there are some jobs, if you want to be an actuary, you're going to need a certification for that. You're going to need a lot of math, and then you're going to need a bunch of tests, and
Right.
you're not going to flip to that. But many jobs do not have that requirement.
Right.
And if you're not good at talking about that, getting with a career coach that can help you kind of assess your entire career. I did this when I was became retirement eligible. I wasn't sure if I was going to retire or not, and I didn't. But it was kind of to assess where I was in life and what I might want to do next, if
Right.
there was a next once I was retirement eligible.
Right.
And number one, I found out I was in the best job I'd ever had, so I wasn't going to leave.
Okay.
But we also kind of came up with the who is Jeff Grant sales pitch, and what do I bring to the table if and when I do want to get another job. And it's really learning to talk about that, because your skills are very transferable, but if you don't think about your skills, you think about the things you know, which is the least important of all, because we all can learn, but like there are certain skills and attributes that we have as human beings, and thinking about what those are and what that means for the kind of work I'm going to gravitate to and succeed in, but not in the subject matter area, but in just like what types of things do I like doing. So if I like doing data, I could do health data, but I could do labor statistics or something too. I would have to learn the ins and outs of labor statistics, but figuring out that I want to be a data person, or I want to code, or I want to run large operations, what have you. I want to do startup work. Some people don't want to do startup work. Some people want to do work that is, there's a cookbook for it already, and they're very good at following the cookbook. I would not be a great auditor because I like doing startup work. I don't want to sit there and just review operating procedures. I could do it, and I'd be capable of doing it, but am I going to thrive doing that? Am I going to want to show up for work in the morning? But there are other people, that's exactly what they want. They want to look at that cookbook, and then they want to review what you did and say, you're right on. So I think it's really understanding what makes you tick as a human being and what you bring to the table and why somebody should hire you regardless of industry, and being able to sell that to people so that you get off of what you know and get into really who you are as a human.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're the kind of thinker that I run into more often these days. Hopefully, because I'm putting things into the world to help find people and have people find me, to who are not totally locked into this path has to be the path. This just because I've been in this industry means I have to always be in this industry. Systems thinking. It could be, you can call it lots of generalists. There are problems that you can solve across lots of different spheres that are not tied to only having experience in one particular field, which to me that's the exciting part to me, is if you can sort of reinvent yourself. And it doesn't even feel like reinvention to me. It's just like, here's a new thing. This looks remarkably similar to that thing over there that neither of these people realize are connected.
And I will say everybody is a generalist. A lot of people start identifying as, I'm a health policy specialist, or, whatever it is. They're not thinking about the general skills they have. So, like, if you're in a field that is thriving and you can make your living in that field based on domain knowledge and expertise, go for it. But if you're trying to jump fields, it immediately, you have to unstick yourself from this concept of you being the domain that you know rather than the general skills that every one of us has as human beings. And so, I don't like the term generalist, because we're all generalists. Like, it's just some people have more specialized knowledge as well. And I think that becomes a sticking point unless you're in a field, again, where that specialized knowledge is super useful.
Right. And required. Yeah.
And required, and you can have unlimited career growth.
Yeah, exactly. Which is probably rarer than people think, but that's another conversation. Jeff, for people who want to get to know you more and what you're doing these days, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, I am with Schedule F Healthcare Strategies is my company, and we abbreviate that SCEDF.com. So we have a website, SCEDF.com. If you want to communicate with us, you can just shoot an email to info@SCEDF.com. That's SCHEDF.com.
Great. And LinkedIn, you're on LinkedIn.
I am on LinkedIn.
There you go. And very active.
Happy to connect with anybody.
There you go. Awesome. Great. Well, Jeff, great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time. And as always, I learned things, which is part of the point. So thank you for leveraging what you've experienced and helping all of us to level up.
All right. Great talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Bye.